Geology, geology, geology. Welcome everybody to another program of the Mini Geology Show. Today we also have video, not only audio, since you know that Mini Geology historically is a radio show. So now with the situation with the coronavirus, we are pre-recording the videos and we really hope to go live as soon as we can in KPFT Houston. This is Daniel Minizini, your inquisitive geologist, and as you know, we link our beloved science of geology to society at large. Today, we have one of the largest local societies in the world. With us today, the president of the Houston Geological Society, Jim Tucker, president-elect. Welcome, Jim.
Good day to everyone.
Jim, I think that you, better than anybody here in Houston, in Texas, you have the finger on the pulse of the activities related to geology. What's going on with this coronavirus pandemic? Can you tell us?
Well, there are a lot of things going on, some differently, some the same as usual, but maybe we're not seeing them. Certainly, there are probably more geoscientists in the Houston area than any place in the world, with all the industrial geology as well as the academic geology that occurs around here. We see a lot about the large companies and some of the layoffs and furloughs that they're doing with some of their staff, and so some people are less busy than they would otherwise be, and obviously people are not in their offices. But there's also in the Houston area more independent geologists, either as operators or consultants, than anywhere else in the world. And we are used to working at home in home offices or spare bedrooms. And these days, when you can do most anything you need in terms of electronic support remotely, then that's not a new thing to several hundred people around town that have been doing that for many years. So there's probably in Houston the entire spectrum of everything from large company and office work, which is not happening in offices now, to individual operators and consultants working by themselves. And as we know, the universities several weeks ago went to remote learning and remote classes and seminars. And I imagine tests coming up, since it's test season for college kids. And so people are adapting, and I know at the Houston Geological Society, we're investigating technical outlets other than our traditional meetings, and going to be having some of those online in the next month or two, and then planning for next year's activities. We usually run mostly September through June. And for example, we have a big biennial Africa conference with several hundred attendees, and that will be next September at current plans. And we're beginning to consider what if people can't travel, and having remote speakers for that and remote attendance. So we're considering some things that the technology, the communications technology, has been there for a long time, but we haven't used it because we're comfortable with what we've been doing. So I think from crisis comes innovation.
And Jim, what is your personal situation? What is your professional job beyond the now the role that you have as president of the Houston Geological Society?
Well, I'm a consultant, have been for several years since returning from Saudi Arabia. And there has not been a lot of consulting work the past few years, but I've been able to do a variety of independent studies and investigate some patent ideas. And I do volunteer quite a bit with both geoscience and other activities around town. Just this next week, the Geological Society will have its first group volunteer session at the Houston Food Bank, because one of the functions of a local society is knowing your colleagues and counterparts. And since we're not doing that at technical meetings, this would be a safe opportunity to meet and refresh our friendships with people, colleagues that we know, and work in a safe environment and do something good for the community.
Most of the members of the Houston Geological Society, I bet that they are working around the oil and gas. And what aren't they worried? What is the future of oil and gas nowadays after this pandemic? Is this industry dying?
Well, certainly there's a lot of realignment, and I think the evolution has been going on for several years. Certainly, there are a lot fewer large companies than there were when I started in the late 1970s, and so I think the scale is changing, and the need for scale for some of the technical things that geoscientists do don't necessarily have to be in a large company setting.
Jim, what now you have been a member of the Houston Geological Society for years, and in the very last years you have been involved in the management of the society. What are the members asking right now to the society? I bet there's something specific with regard to the pandemic and the economic turmoil.
Well, certainly any sort of support, and there has been a call, and that's one reason we are accelerating remote presentations and remote meetings, as well as some of the other groups around town. The Chief Geologist group, which is a networking group, several weeks ago had its first remote meeting. Usually it's a luncheon, but people met remotely at the same time, and essentially got their networking in. They share prospects that they're looking for investors in, and areas of interest, and looking for partners. So that sort of activity is still going on, and we're preparing to have the more traditional technical presentations captured in electronic fashion. For many years, we have videoed our luncheon and dinner meetings, and those are available online in the HGS YouTube channel. But we'll be essentially having what will be more or less canned presentations, but we'll still have the benefits of the speakers' graphics and their discussion along with their slides.
Why do the members like or need these presentations?
It's a matter of continuing education. We're all responsible to some degree or other on maintaining our skills and our information. Of course, a great deal of information is geographically based in our profession, and so there will be topical conferences. As I mentioned, we have an Africa conference coming up in several months here in Houston, but there's also topical information along the technical specialties, whether sedimentology and stratigraphy, structural geology, geochemistry, both organic and inorganic. So there's a wide range of aspects that people do want to continually train themselves for as professionals after their university experience.
I have friends that they work in Houston and they lost their job. They are members of the Houston Geological Society. What do you tell to the unemployed geologists?
That the first thing is maintain uh, your professionalism, which includes uh, an emphasis on networking. If you have neglected that in the past, and it's real easy as nerds to get off in our corner and do what we like to do and neglect that sometimes. And as well as any training opportunities. And these days, there are a lot of opportunities at low or no cost. Also, HGS, along with APG, SIPES, and GSH, locally partner with SPE, the Society of Petroleum Engineers local chapter, twice a year in a hiring event, upstream hiring event, where we can put people that are looking for positions together with companies of all sizes that are looking to add staff. So we were going to have our first one for this year on the 29th of March. That got canceled because of the um, uh, necessary restrictions on gathering, and it's clearly a face-to-face uh, event and has been rescheduled for late September. Hopefully, by late September, we will know whether we can gather, and so we'll be participating in that hiring event. It's much more effective. The face-to-face aspects, um, now that so much of the applications for employment are all online, and there's some faceless computer that screens for keywords and that sort of thing. So um, there's quite a bit of value for being able to communicate the qualitative aspects of what a person's skills and experience are beyond the degree and just the calendar years of experience. And I think both employers and job seekers both value that.
Jim, do you think it is realistic to expect to be higher in this period? Or when do you foresee a new season for hiring?
That it's hard to say. Actually it's on this hiring event. It's somewhat encouraging that I believe we had by the time we had to suspend several weeks ahead of time, we had 16 organizations signed up to interview, and I believe once we told them we would not be having the event until September, 13 of them right away said, "Well, keep us on the list, and we'll still be there." So things are happening. The scale. Um, Large companies, which we're both experienced with, move slowly, and a lot of times the hiring is not strategic, and it's sort of, well, we need a bunch of bodies right now, rather than we look forward to having these people contribute for the next 25 or 30 years. Uh, that's not always the case, but that's often the case. One encouraging thing that I've seen in the recent reported um, layoffs or separations is at least one company in Houston has furloughed some of their geoscientists and I presume other professionals. That is, everyone was already working from home, and everybody already had their company computer or whatever. But they said, okay, well, from some point a couple of weeks ago, uh, you will no longer get a paycheck, but you'll still have your medical benefits and those sort of things. And then every 90 days, we'll reassess and see when we want to go back to business more or less as usual, and whether or not each of these individuals will be returning or they'll be separated. So that to me is much more strategic than companies have been in the past, because it so often has been drought or flood. And I've seen a number of these from when I started in the late 1970s, and the painful dissolution of a number of companies through the late 1980s, and the doldrums of the 1990s. So it may be that companies are being more strategic. And I know years ago, before I started, that was the pattern. It was very rare for companies to lay off a lot of people in these sweeping, poorly organized responses, but they would keep people on, and you would just do your regional work. I know at the company I worked for in the early 80s, you could look back at the regional maps and you could see when the slowdowns were every 7 or 8 or 9 years, because that's when the regional maps would be updated, because they weren't drilling any wells. So there weren't well plans and well programs to propose. But they did the work that everyone always knew needed to be done, but there never was time with the press of drilling and regular operations. So clearly that world began to change, at least for the U.S. business, in the 1980s. I think the national companies have always been different. I worked for Saudi Aramco for 10 years, and they took more of a long wavelength look at their staffing.
Jim, what about the professional figure that the companies are looking for in this period? If we have unemployed geologists or students that are seeking for the very first job, what can you tell them about the roles, the kind of professionals that the companies need?
Okay, entry level, I think the smart companies will want people who have a well-rounded set of skills, because particularly for exploration and to a large degree development, you don't know exactly what you'll be dealing with. I know a decade or so ago, with the advent of the low permeability plays, a lot of people were hired to look at the so-called unconventionals. And so they got a very special set of skills for looking at these low permeability rocks and geosteering horizontal and extended reach wells. But many of them now have 10 years of experience, which is really 1 year of experience 10 times. And that's limiting. And the fact that their companies did not try and extend their skills early in their careers means that they're essentially entry level in terms of skills, perhaps, but now they're in their late 30s or whatever, and it is not a time technically that you want to be starting over. And it's so I feel for those people. I know many of the larger companies have maintained development programs where the early career people will get a taste of exploration, new ventures, either in the U.S. or around the world, development of different company assets, because each of those you use a lot of the same tools, but in varying degrees of depth and experience and developing your expertise. So I think as a generalist myself, I think that all of the little things that you learn are used sooner or later. Even the volcanology comes in once or twice a year. So as you know from looking at the bentonites in the Eagleford, so it's the reason that so many of us got into the geology part of geoscience is the variety and the ability to draw from all of the little pieces of things that we learn and apply them to solving problems. So that's not necessarily the thing that companies think they're looking for when they hire dozens of people at a time, because they just need some butts in chairs. They think in front of screens in order to get the work done, and they're not really considering the development of those staff.
What about so this was for entry level. What about for intermediate careers?
Intermediate career, and that actually is the focus of the twice a year hiring event here in Houston, is mid-career, which is anywhere from 3 or 4 years experience to 30 years experience. There's a wide range of people that do participate. If people have their skills, then they are going to be more likely to fit that empty desk that someone has in their office, some company has in their office, that they're looking to fill because they will have had a couple of years experience doing one thing, a couple of years of experience doing another thing, that have exposure to field and drilling operations. And so if that's needed, then they can involve themselves quickly with that in a new organization. So again, it goes back to experience and skills. If a company is just looking for 6 people that know Algeria, well, that's going to thin out the crowd pretty quickly. But if what they're looking for is staff and geoscientists that will be able to quickly get up to speed on whatever comes in the door, because you don't know necessarily from one month to the next where the opportunities are going to be, and certainly we don't know from one month to the next what the economics are going to be. That the people who are flexible are going to be the people that have the easiest time professionally in terms of staying employed. And obviously, if you are an independent, then a lot rides on what economics are, but you're also a lot more flexible in how quickly you can respond to economic situations.
Do you personally, Jim, have any employees?
No, I don't. I just have one, and that's me. And the boss is a real jerk sometimes, but it's fortunately I have the latitude to do that. I've been working more or less continuously since the late 70s, and now I have the latitude to do fun things and things that I enjoy, and look at geology that I like, and as well as other things. So I've been very fortunate, and know that anybody that doesn't think they're lucky stars every morning when they get out of bed is a fool, because being able to do what we do and work figuring out little pieces of the history of the Earth is about the most fun you can have with your clothes on. So it's I think we're all aware of that in the back of our minds, how fortunate we are, and often don't get a chance to stand back and consider that.
Jim, have you ever been unemployed?
Oh yeah, and
when did it happen? How did you feel?
okay. Well, there were still good separation packages when I left the first company that I worked about half my career in. They're not around anymore. They were purchased by another large company. I learned a lot in that year and certainly met a lot of people that I wasn't commonly meeting. People from.
So you have been a whole year unemployed.
Yeah. I had a couple of little consulting gigs. I was up in the Dallas area, and there's less activity there.
How was your mood?
It was, well, I was pretty much always learning something, and it was I was exposed to people that didn't do what I did and who didn't deal professionally with the same things I'd been doing. So that was good. And I learned from them, and I learned from the outplacement, because job hunting is not a skill that they teach you in school. And, obviously income is down, but we were economically okay. And then I eventually got a job with a service company, and it was a foreign-owned service company, and that was an experience that I had wanted to have, having worked for a U.S. company. And I learned an amazing amount while I was there. It was a geophysical company, primarily seismic. And so being about the only geologist in the middle of 2,000 or 3,000 doodlebuggers, it was an amazing group of people, and I learned a whole lot. And unfortunately, and I'd never been in a profit and loss situation. I mean, I'd always been in exploration, which is by definition a cost center. And so this was a P&L situation. And so I learned a lot really quickly in that situation. But then in the late 90s, you couldn't sell anything to anybody. And so that ended. And I worked after that with a colleague and friend from graduate school. And we were both structural geologists. And so he had built a small consultancy doing structural analysis and dip log analysis. And he was also had software skills, so he had software. So I worked with him and was his Houston representative and worked on projects here. And my first experience of having a Sun Spark station in the spare bedroom and being my own system administrator, which was scary for me, and was a different set of skills, both doing the service work, meeting clients, and supporting the software that was in clients' offices around town. And then I had applied earlier, years before, to Saudi Aramco, and nothing ever happened. And then I got a contact from one of my colleagues from my first company, and he was already there, and he said they were looking for people. And so I applied again and spent 10 years at Saudi Aramco in both exploration and then upstream research, geoscience
This is
research.
living in Saudi Arabia?
Yep. Yeah, in the Eastern Province.
How was that experience of living in Saudi Arabia for 10 years?
Well, it was good. We were glad to go, and we were glad to come back. And it was our kids were in late elementary and junior high, and all they had ever seen was suburban Dallas and Houston. So it was a good experience for them, and a good experience being in the middle of another culture and working for a national company has its own set of skills and learning. It's a combination of a big company, a big petroleum company, and a government company. And so you combine all of those things, and there's some new things to learn along the way with that as well.
And how is the culture of the people of that country that they know that they rely on petroleum so heavily? What do they think about oil and gas?
Well, it's for two generations since the late 1940s, it has been there, at least in the Eastern Province of Arabia, and so there were people that I worked with who were national employees whose fathers had worked for Aramco, and so there was a lot of the inherited culture from the pre-nationalization time, which was it was nationalized fully, I believe, in the early 1980s, and so there was quite a bit of that culture there. And being a national company, geographically, it was very inward looking because they were charged only with looking at resources within the kingdom. So in that sense, a lot of the data was well maintained because as opposed to some of the organizations that we've worked in, where data management sometimes gets the stepchild treatment, they knew they were going to be working in the same place for 100 years. So the maintaining the data was excellent, and they had some very good ways, both electronic and hard copy, to maintain the data.
When you were there in the kingdom, did geological societies exist
Oh
like
yes,
we think about them?
very very vigorous. The Dhahran Geoscience Society, which I was a member of for several years, um, has been very vigorous for a long time. There would be periodic weekend field trips, and then usually once a year there'd be a big field trip. We went to Tanzania one time, went to Ethiopia another time. So yeah, very active community, and the every 2 years there was a big Middle East geoscience convention for 2 to 3 days in Bahrain, and obviously Saudi Aramco had been a big supporter of that for a long time.
Is the mindset of the Middle East societies that you have known similar to the Western societies? The mission, the visions, are they similar, or they have a different view on what is their role?
Oh, the ones that I saw, it was very similar because they would generally grow out of the experience of expats who were there that said, well, we ought to have a local society. We have some geoscientists here, and we can share information, and it's as well an opportunity for as is the case in a lot of places like Houston, a place for people that work for operating companies, universities, service companies, to all get together because we all have those geoscience interests in common.
I see. And now going back to the Houston Geological Society, give us like an overview of the Houston Geological Society. How many members you have? What is the status? Is it a healthy society? and what are the main activities you are doing?
Okay. Start with the general. There are most years over 3,000 members of the HGS.
So is that the largest local society?
It's the largest local society in the world. Yes. Some of the others are pretty close, and particularly those with more remote members. But I actually maintained my membership since I joined in 1980, even when I lived in Los Angeles or Plano or Daharan, just to stay in touch because this is the fifth time I've lived in Houston, so I always figured I would be back here at least one or two more times, and so staying in touch with that as kind of a home society, in addition to always enjoying participating in the societies in other places that I've lived. So we have a variety of activities throughout the years, pretty slow in July and August. But that gives the incoming boards, because our officer years run July through June, a chance to get going. And then technical meetings will be September through May, generally. We've had a little hiatus as we reorganize for remote meetings, but we'll be starting those again in a couple of weeks, we hope. And then field trips, thinking through the year. In October, there's big participation in Earth Science Week, which is a national effort coordinated by the American Geological Institute and all of its subsidiary organizations. Participate as an affiliate in AAPG, and often host the convention here, which is still the plan to be the second week of June, and we'll know in a couple of weeks whether that's going to happen or not. Like so many things, that's being considered, and it may be delayed. There's a variety of technical short courses that have been very successful through the years. In recent years, there's been a Mud Rocks symposium every year, geomechanics, other topical courses, as well as topical field trips for modern sedimentation to the Brazos River, our barrier bars. Some social, strictly social events, tennis tournament, golf tournament, skeet shoot, which right now the skeet shoot is planned for June, and we're going to see if that's going to happen or not. So there's a variety of ways, and many people with that many members are very interested in one thing, like talking to elementary and junior high schools. We have a program for that with Bones in the Schools out of the HGS, and other participating in other activities, science fair judging. I helped judge with the science fair one Saturday afternoon in February, and the society sponsors 2 or 3 summer interns from science fair winners at the Natural History Museum every summer. So there's a variety of community involvements as well as professional involvements, and some things that are strictly social and networking.
What about the status of the society? Is it growing, is stable, or is decreasing the number of the members?
Stable, and it's going up and down. The membership year is July through June. So we'll see how the renewals go. The cost of membership is pretty modest, and being a member is not required to attend many of the events, such as the social or the technical luncheon and dinner in the past, going forward video, technical presentations. So there is an effort to make sure that everyone who's interested and qualified can be a member and participate to the degree they enjoy and in the particular direction that they enjoy. We have over 30 different committees just because of the wide interest in the activities, and many of these committees do focus on one or two technical or social areas, whether it's a golf tournament or a field trip or talking to kids in schools.
And Jim, you as a president, would you like to maintain the status quo of the society, or are you trying to change something?
Well, right now we're looking at what we ought to be changing. We for a few years ago we stopped providing a printed bulletin automatically with the membership because the economics of hard copy publication are just terrible and getting worse. I know we've seen that with all of us that subscribe to several societies, technical journals. It's just less and less economic. So the PDF hard copy is available from the HGS website, and so it's still published, but published in electronic form. So that's changed. We are constantly looking for economies and not doing things the way we always have done because we've always done them that way. And the current
what do you mean you're looking for economics?
The bulletin printing was one thing. We're constantly looking. We moved our offices to a slightly smaller office this past year, which saved a little money. As we perhaps have remote technical presentations, that's going to have different economics because if you have a meal and a presentation, the economics are much different than if you have a video presentation. And as well as I mentioned our upcoming Africa symposium, that we're right now considering just how that could work with remote presentations as well as remote attendance. And we do that in alternation with the Petroleum Exploration Society of Great Britain, headquartered in London, UK. And we each hosted in alternate years. And many people who are working on Africa projects do come from Europe. So as many people that are doing Africa work work in companies in Houston. So I think it's a time for creativity, and it will get us off of dead center where this will probably be the last year we have mail out ballots, just because everyone these days does have an email and electronic access, which 10 years ago was not the case. And so, that will, we can save money with that we can put into other programs.
You say that you have to be creative. What are the main problems inside the association?
Mostly making sure that the events that we do, the technical events and the social events, do serve a need and are still of interest to people. I think many of us have seen an evolution in professional participation and being members of organizations, particularly a number of them, both local, national, international, seems to be less of a professional practice and commitment for many of our early career colleagues. And I have talked to a few that I talked to because they have been laid off from their first employer. And, I say, so what have you participated in? Who do you know around town other than me? And how have you developed your place in a professional community? And particularly, we talked about publishing a little bit a minute ago. The in the past, in order to get technical bulletins, you had to be a member of a professional society. And so many things these days are available free, are in pirated copies, are available by passed around PDFs, for example, for technical literature, that there's no longer necessarily a need to have an access to have technical information on your desk or on your screen. So one thing we participate in a publication of archive publication program of the AAPG, where we benefit from past publications of the HGS that are sold for micropayments or provided by micropayments online, the data pages services. So a lot of those technical access things, creative things have come up, but people hopefully are not depending on their employer for everything, because that can disappear as we've seen over a weekend. And so people need to continually maintain themselves professionally, which includes being responsible for their own professional development and training, for developing a network of colleagues that they know and participate with, and either do things professionally with, sometimes do business with. Particularly in the case of consultants and independents, the network that you have is how you're exposed to opportunities and how you are able to do geology and eat at the same time.
Jim, what is the typical member of the Houston Geological Society?
The typical member, as we're all familiar with in our profession, a lot of people did, whether they trained in geoscience in university or not, did not continue in geoscience from sometime in the late 1980s through the 1990s and the early part of this century. Again, less so in the national companies. This is more of a U.S. Canada perspective. And so there's a big demographic saddle. So like the rest of the profession, the HGS membership has a lot of people with 30 years or more experience, and a growing number of people with 10 to 15 years experience, and not a lot of people in that tranche in between. And that is going to move as it has through the demographics of all of the professional societies for a number of years to come.
What is the implication of having a large group of people, of very senior geologists, and then another group of people that are middle-aged professionals and very few youngsters?
Well, actually, there's more youngsters than middle age. That's where the gap is in terms of experience. Is the say the 15 to 25 or 30 year experience is really where a big demographic gap is. And so over a decade ago, it's now almost 20 years ago, the HGS a program was started called NeoGeos, which focused on folks in their first 10 years or so of professional practice. And it's still going on, still vigorous. And it's one of the things I've done. I've been president-elect this year, and one of the committees that I keep track of is the NeoGeos committee. So I've been to a number of their events, both social and professional, technical, and so I have enjoyed those and have encouraged folks who are interested there to take up committee work, and in fact, a couple of them are candidates in the elections we're currently having for this next board year. And so that's how you begin to prepare yourself professionally and work. I know I started volunteering with the HGS when I was pretty early career after I moved here in 1980 from Tulsa. And I really hadn't done anything with the Geological Society there except go to meetings and kind of try not to show anybody how ignorant I was and inexperienced. But I started with the ballot committee, which is sort of once a year for a few hours counting ballots. And so did that my early years with HGS, then moved to Los Angeles for a different position within the same company, ARCO, and was active with the LA Basin Society there. And in the 4 years I was there, I was treasurer, secretary, vice president, and president. So it is dangerous to volunteer sometime if you're not ready to jump all the way into the pool. And then we moved, the company moved then to Plano, north of Dallas. And I did quite a bit with the Dallas Geological Society while I lived in that area. And in fact, I helped start the International Interest Group of the DGS, which is still continuing and now will be coming up on 20 years of activity as a special interest group in the Dallas group. And from there moved back to Houston and did things with the Houston International Interest Group, and then Saudi Arabia, and then since I've been back here, have been doing a variety of things with the HGS the past few years.
So Jim Tucker, president-elect of the Houston Geological Society. The mic is yours. Express yourself, talk with the viewers and the audience.
Okay, well, very pleased to have an opportunity to talk to you today via Daniel's efforts. And it's another example of geoscientists volunteering out in the community. Since I know Pacifica has a wide audience of a lot of interest, I hope this has been of interest to you, and I hope you begin to think about how geoscience plays at least a little part in all of our lives, whether it's weather and climate down to the solid earth or the oceans and rivers. And as we commonly talk about among ourselves, geology is everything and comes into every little piece of life if you just pay attention and look hard enough. And so I hope this has been of use to the general audience, and also to my professional colleagues who might be listening. We're a big, happy, diverse, and opinionated group, and we do enjoy one another's company, and we all hope that we can continue doing geoscience for as long as it stays interesting and fun, because it is a lot of fun. And we are used to taking a long time look. When you're dealing in millions of years, what the weather is today is a smaller piece of that. So everything passes and ends up in the geologic record sooner or later. So I hope we can all take as long a view as possible and stay involved, stay healthy, volunteer for something this week, and a happy 50th birthday to KPFT.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jim Tucker, President-elect of the Houston Geological Society with Mini Geology. Thank you, Jim. This was another episode of a Mini Geology show where we connect our beloved science of geology, its applications, with society at large. You can see this video in YouTube channel, minigeology.com. You can write me at minigeology@gmail.com to propose new people to interview, to propose yourself to be interviewed, or just to mention what is the kind of topic that you want to see tackled in the next episode of Mini Geology. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much.
Everybody be safe.